Good evening. How you doing? Well, we've dropped down. We're about 57 or 58, and it's a little chilly, but and it's as you can see from the sky above, it's overcast in every direction. So the Thomas Jefferson weather report is not a good one today. Let's turn our attention to the two lead stories, which continue to be what's going on in the Middle East and what's going on in Capitol Hill. In the Middle East, I'm talking to you toward the evening, so it's about 5:30ish, I think. At about 4:39 p.m., a hospital was hit in the Gaza area, and the allegation was that it was Israel that had done it. Israel denied it, said there could have been a misfire, but it wasn't them, and they said that it had to be Hamas. Hamas has denied it. Hamas is attacking, and I'm talking about in the war of words, they're attacking Israel, saying that they're not telling the truth, and casting about for who could be responsible for this. Hamas immediately called upon other nations to join in. So how soon, when we think we have a break, do we find that we don't? And what I'm talking about is, yesterday the reports were both generally and I guess more specific as the evening went on, about how Hamas was prepared to release without any conditions those that were being held as hostages. And then that was changed in a variety of ways, including the timing of when that would happen. We could well imagine why the hardliners, that is those both for Israel and for Hamas, would want this to go forward and to annihilate each other. The understanding by Biden is that the occupation is a non-starter, and apparently he's encouraged the Israelis not to invade, not to take over the Gaza. As far as I can tell, Israel is not contesting that publicly. What they're doing privately may be a different thing, and so we'll have to find out. Does this put a cooler on whether or not Biden goes to the zone and meet with the leaders? And I hope he does, but I hope he can do it safely, which has got to be a consideration. Because for the same reason that we have this scary incident involving a hospital in which we have cancer patients and others under fire, which if that's not a war crime, I don't know what is. We have that going on. What can we expect if either Israel or Hamas did that purposefully? What would be their interest in protecting our president? Now, one could exaggerate the risk that Biden is putting himself in going there. But in my experience, the best leaders don't want to sit on a couch somewhere. They want to be where the action is. I believe Biden believes in his ability to bring people together. And he has a long career in which he has. Now, it doesn't work all the time, and there's nothing to say it would work here. But if we don't have leaders who come forward, who try to combat the bloodthirst among factions, if not the leadership, among both the Israelis and Hamas, what can we believe in? We have to believe that they exist, and they have to be dealt with. So this is a real problem. It has been for many years, as we know, and it is now. So the optimism I had yesterday is curbed by the developments that we have today. And the developments we have today may have been based on the fact that some factions on either or both sides would be much happier if this was a fight to the death. This is not what intelligent people do. It's not what civilizations do. It is what humans do to each other. And the question is, can we give peace a chance? And the answer remains to be seen. Meanwhile, back at the Capitol, we have No Jacket Jordan forced to vote on the floor. And, you know, I've been involved with whips, which is the function that they ascribe to certain members of a party to keep track of the votes and to whip the vote. So, for example, if the leadership decides a vote should be a certain way, then the whip goes and encourages people to vote that way and tells those who don't have to vote that way or just to be present so that it doesn't compromise their ability to return to office. But plainly, the Democrats whipped the vote to support Jeffries, who was the leader of the Democratic caucus, and they did. They voted for him. So in the end, what we had 200 votes for No Jacket Jordan and 210 votes, if I have that right, for the Democrat, for Jeffries. So, now, you may say, well, then why isn't he Speaker? It's not enough to get the biggest vote. You have to get the majority vote. And that's 217, unless you reduce the universe by those who are present but don't vote. And we didn't, I don't know if we had one vote in that case. And there was one Republican who was not present because of a funeral that he attended in the afternoon. And there's talk, as I go out to walk and talk a little bit, there's talk about having another vote. I think that the Republicans should learn their math. It took McCarthy 15 times to get a vote, and there's no tolerance in the chamber for Republicans to go through that same exercise. And some don't even want to go through it a second time. And some Republicans who did vote for Jordan said they would only do so on the first ballot. In other words, you got one ballot to make this work. So what's the chance of Republicans supporting Jeffries? Normally it'd be a long shot. So, but it's still a possibility. And, you know, if Jeffries is getting 210 votes, what's 7 more? Can he get 7 more out of their team? And what agreements would one have to make that happen? There is one final thought that I have about what's going on between the Middle East and here on Capitol Hill. It is whenever we mix politics and religion or ideological values, we get mishigas, we get a mess. And that's kind of what we have. I don't know if you've been to India, but there's a belief that the Ganga River turns north, which is unusual for a river to do that. And they see in that auspicious tellings, if you will, that there's something special about that. And Varanasi is at that point in the river. And it's a very interesting place because it's like those imagined places that are real, where there are people who are distorted and malformed for various reasons, including malnutrition and drugs and things like that. In shops in the street, and people so crowded that they can't help but knock into each other. And there's what I really think is a tripartite experience as you get to the river Ganga. And I originally thought that when I got there, I would want to swim in that water. But when I got there, I observed 3 things. One is I went on a boat into the water. Holly and I both did this. And there were candles floating on the water, and it was a place of worship. And it was like in the center place from where I observed what was to our right and to our left. To our left, they were having services for the dead, and they were cremating them, and they were throwing them. Throwing is not the right word. They were allowing them to enter the waters of the Ganga. So, upriver from where I was to the left, they were putting into the water the cremated remains of those who had had their Indian last rites, if you will. Now, to the right of where I was, which I couldn't see at night, but I saw the next day, there are people in the river cleaning their clothes in those same waters. And so you see the mix of things that are truly treacherous for the people who partake in those waters, as auspicious as they may be. So what's the thought pattern here? The thought pattern is that we have to find a way to use our reason in situations which become complex, auspicious, mysterious, dangerous, to understand how we get on through. And so in the Middle East, we have large differences about religion that seem to motivate a large amount of the strife and hate and misunderstanding and war and abuses and outrages that are biblical in scope, that you read in the good book, supposedly. But you also live in the real world, where people die and pass into the waters of life, and people wash themselves in these same waters. And so what we have is an image of us dealing with the multidimensional world and belief systems we live in, which have mixtures of magic, science, and religion that determine how a person acts, or how whole groups act, how people act, how they may lie to make the world conform with their belief system. So we see that in the Middle East. And the real question is, what does a right-thinking political figure do that's right if you have people who are so certain they want to kill each other, you let them do it? I think the answer is, it would be one thing if they just did it to themselves, whatever small fraction of the population, or even a larger fraction. What can they have to say to another person whose life they've compromised, whose families they've destroyed, whose property they've taken, whose health they've compromised, who've been denied food and medicine, a place to stay, who've been cut off from the world by land and sea and air? That's what the Middle East is about. And I think if Biden and his team can find a way through this mess in the Middle East, he'd be deserving of great awards. But before we break out the festivities, we must keep in mind that we're a long way from a final solution that errs on the side of peace, in a place in the world where we've had war so long between Israelis and Palestinians, and there seems to be no end in sight that leads to peace. So the miracle of the Middle East will be more auspicious than a river that turns north, seemingly in defiance of what we understand about rivers and physics and tectonic plates, frankly. But in the Middle East, are we going to be able to preserve and protect humanity from itself? Are we going to find a way past these gradations and blanket white and black differences that keep us on either side of the rampart fighting with each other. And so, if we can't, humanity is damned. And there's a lot of data points before today that suggest that may be true. But if you can't dedicate yourself to peace and getting along, how could any other belief system be worth more than that? I don't believe it is. And what it shows is that when your politics and your government is determined by religion or magic and not by science or reason, that you're on a very dangerous path. And I think we see the political outcome here, and we see it in the Middle East, and there are chapters of this failure throughout the world right now. So when we settle these things on Capitol Hill, or in Jerusalem, or in Gaza, or with the Hezbollah, if we settle these things the right way, we're making a settlement for the world. So that's what I got today. Sorry if I rambled too much, but I've been thinking about Varanasi and the symbolic extremes of the people surviving there with maladies that wouldn't occasion themselves on very many people. So I spin and say goodbye for today, and hopefully tomorrow we'll have something better to talk about. Bye-bye.